Sergeant Amir stood alone among the broken towers of the old spaceport. Dawn was a thin line on the horizon. Smoke rose in slow, bitter ropes. Metal shells and glass teeth jutted from the ground like graves. He held a small plastic soldier in his right hand. The paint was gone from its face. A child had once loved it. Now it was all that was left of his family. He could hear the patrols before he saw them. The aliens moved with a quiet that felt wrong to human ears. Their boots made no noise on the burned ground. Their helmets reflected the ruins like black mirrors. Amir felt the old fear like a weight in his chest. He had learned to hold it in one place. He let it sit there and breathe. A child's laugh came to him once in memory. He thought of that laugh now, and his hands stopped shaking. He tightened his jaw. He checked his left side. The small radio at his hip was taped up. The tape was old and sticky and smelled like diesel and sweat. It crackled when he turned it on. Static. Then a soft click. He did not expect a voice. Sergeant Amir. The voice was alien and strict. It used the wrong vowel in the wrong way. He understood it because he had been listening for months. Amir kept his face still. He could not show pleasure. The aliens read faces like maps. He thought of the promise he had made in the dark of a bombed-out house. He had whispered to his wife that he would come back for her. He had promised to keep the girl safe. He had failed both. The plastic soldier pressed into his palm like a small accusation. Footsteps came closer. A small patrol moved along the twisted rails. They wore light armor and carried long rods that glowed blue at the tip. Amir could see one of them glance at him through a cracked helmet. The alien tilted its head in that slow, amused way. They liked to test the trapped. Amir did not move. He let them sweep past. Then he walked. His boots crunched on broken glass. He kept the toy hidden in his fist. He wanted the patrol to think he was nothing. He wanted them to drop their guard. He reached a ruined maintenance bay and stepped into its shadow. The patrol moved on. He heard them laugh in a dry, careful way. Amir set the plastic soldier on a rusted tool chest. He put his palm over it, steady. The sound of the city behind him was a thin ache. A rusted sign squealed in the wind. He worked with steady fingers. He did not look at the device until it was almost ready. Wires taped to a metal clip. A small, humming battery. A crude trigger fashioned from a bent spoon. He had built worse with scraps that smelled of burnt rubber and hope. The device was small enough to hide in a sleeve. It was ugly and clever. He thought of Mercy. Mercy had a shape in his mind. It was a warm hand. It was a voice that said, "I will not hurt you." He had seen that shape die on the first day the aliens stepped out of the sky. Mercy did not feed children. Mercy did not keep shelters warm. Mercy did not stop a cruiser from vaporizing a field of tents. Mercy had become a language the aliens used to judge themselves. Humans had no such language now. He slipped the device into his sleeve and walked back toward the broken rails. A patrol turned a corner. 2 soldiers in front. 2 behind. Amir moved with them. His breath did not make a sound. He reached into his sleeve and let his fingers close on the device. His hand was steady. A child's toy lay on the chest where he had left it. The paintless soldier stared up at him. He had no plan to use the toy. It was a witness. Amir placed his gloved hand over it and let the fingers close like a lid. He squeezed. The small plastic soldier made no noise. An alien voice spoke from behind him in a tone meant to be kind. "Come forward," it said, each word like a polished stone. Amir stepped into the light. The patrol surrounded him. Their helmets caught the sunrise and turned it to cold coin. The lead alien pointed its rod at him. Amir could have lied. He could have begged. He could have tried to run. He did none of those things. He unclipped the radio from his belt. The device crackled. He spoke in the alien tongue the way a child repeats a lesson. His voice was low and wrong and perfect. The patrol stiffened. Those helmets turned back to face him. For a moment there was a gap between the world and itself. Amir did not shout. He spoke one sentence. It was not a threat in his voice. It was a small, dry promise. Then he clicked the radio. The device in his sleeve answered with a soft hum. He felt the heat of the battery on his skin. He waited for the world to end. It did not end. The patrol laughed. The alien in front of him took a step closer. Amir let the radio crackle and sent a quiet signal into the sky. The signal was small. It was nothing more than a human voice shaped into the alien words for command. It was a trick and a truth wrapped together. Far above, on the bridge of a cruiser, an officer heard the same voice. He stopped to hand over a console. His face went still. Orders frozen on his lips burned like a coal. The bridge stilled. Below, in the maintenance bay, Amir watched the patrol's eyes change. The blue rods wavered. The patrol did not move for a long breath. Then two of them reached for him. One held him at the shoulder and looked into his eyes. Amir felt the weight of 1,000 small judgments. He felt the anger and the fear. He did not look away. A chirp came through the sky like a bell. The cruiser's engines changed pitch. Somewhere far away a fleet halted. A voice that was not meant to be there said a command and no one obeyed it. Something fragile and terrible had shifted. Amir smiled then, the small ugly smile that looks like anger and not like joy. He had broken a rule the aliens thought unbreakable. He had learned the language they used to bind themselves. He had learned to answer in the same voice. The patrol relaxed and then tightened. Orders came down like rain from a ship that did not know what to do. Amir felt the toy press under his palm. He remembered the child's laugh. He remembered the promise that had failed and the promise he still could keep. He did not know if he had struck the first real blow. He only knew the patrol looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. Above them, somewhere in the bright dark of space, the fleet held its breath. Rafi worked in a room that smelled of burned plastic and old coffee. The walls were metal ribs and wires. Screens glowed with the faces of cities he would never see again. His hands were raw where he had rubbed them on wire braid. Sweat ran down his neck and into his collar. He did not feel the heat. He only felt the waiting. Outside, the cruiser made a sound like a slow animal. Rafi could hear the engines through the hull. He had listened to that sound for months. He had learned the rhythm of it. He had learned when it held fear and when it held boredom. Tonight it sang a new note. Rafi was not a soldier. He had been a radio man before the skies fell. Now he called himself a mimic. He studied the alien voice like a child learns a song. He watched the way their lips did not move. He mapped their pauses. He learned the small ticks that told an officer the difference between a joke and an order. He had taught himself to speak those ticks without thinking. On the table lay a stack of stolen alien manuals. Pages showed ranks, rituals, and words that smelled of power. Rafi read them with the hunger of a man who must eat or die. He had a torn picture of his sister under his elbow. He touched it when the long work made him numb. He remembered her voice. He remembered the day the ships came and took everything without asking. Tonight Rafi was not alone. A small crew sat around him. Zara, who could pick a lock with a hair. Bilal, who knew ships like someone knows his house. Amir's name moved through their talk now and then like a talisman. Sergeant Amir had done a thing that made whole fleets pause. They hoped to do the same with words. Rafi tuned the transmitter until it breathed like a sleeping beast. He fed the alien syllables into the microphone the way you feed a baby spoon by spoon. He bent his mouth into sounds that hurt his throat. He learned to make the harsh cut they used for stop and the soft fall for acknowledge. When he sent the first message, It felt like he had thrown a stone into a river and watched the ripples run. Far above, on a bridge lined with glass and blue light, the alien captain heard the voice. It was a calm voice. It used a pattern the captain knew as command. The captain frowned. The voice had a pause that meant verify. The captain snapped a hand to a console. Orders halted in air like birds held by a net. The bridge went quiet. Back in the cellar, the crew watched the live feed from a stolen camera. They saw the captain's face, the way a small seam at the temple twitched when he worried. They saw the captain pick up a handset and bark an order. The order met only silence. The mimic had spoken in a way that confused machines and minds. It was small. It was cruel. It was very human. Raffi sent more messages. He made false calls across the fleet. He mimicked supply requests that were not real. He fed a rumor that a convoy would arrive with reinforcements at a place where humans had dug traps. He sent the language of comfort to a unit and then the grammar of fear to its commander. The aliens began to answer themselves. They started to doubt the world they ordered. The city smelled worse on the day Bilal's brother came to the cellar with wide eyes. He said a patrol had taken a man from his alley. They had not killed him. They had taken him to a ship. The man's name was Hassan. He was a grocery worker with a crooked smile. Hassan had always given children oranges when no one else would. The crew knew Hassan. He had taught Raffi how to bend a wire without it breaking. They watched the feeds that showed Hassan inside a small, white room. His hands moved where they could be seen. He smiled a smile that did not reach his eyes. The alien officer in the room offered him food and a warm place near the lights. The officer spoke in a slow, careful voice meant to sound kind. The translator said the alien had offered Hassan mercy in a formal way. Mercy, the translator said, was a law in their books. Hassan was quiet on the screen. He nodded. The officer gave him a small device that ticked like a soft heart. The device would make a man useful. The crew watched Hassan pocket the device and step out into the hallway that led to the bridge. He moved with the kind of small hope that has glass in it. Raffi wanted to scream. Zara's fingers pressed white against the edge of the table. Amir sat still. He remembered the toy in his hand and the way a command from the sky had faltered. He knew that mercy in alien mouths was a snare. He knew too that sometimes a snare could be a tool. They planned to take Hassan back. The plan had been written and erased twice. It had the beauty of a clean strike, cut the calm, free the man, vanish. But the plan would cost men. The crew's faces were maps of tired decisions. They nodded and wrapped their hands around the choices like warm stones. Night came with a single star. The crew moved like ghosts. Zara slipped under a hatch and into the ship's belly. Bilal cut a lock with a blade that shone like a promise. Raffi crawled through the dark toward a camera that watched the corridor to the bridge. He hummed an alien lullaby to keep his voice steady. The lullaby was not his. He had stolen it from a recording of a child singing in a holding cell. They reached Hassan's cell and saw him standing at a small window. He looked back at them with the same crooked smile. He stepped down into the corridor with the alien officer at his side. The door closed behind them. The officer trusted him. Hassan walked forward with the weight of a man who hoped to be saved. Raffi's hand was on the transmitter. He could call a false alarm now, a small storm that would free Hassan and give them one chance to get him away. He pressed the key but did not send. The plan slipped from his fingers like water when he saw Hassan look up and smile, not the smile of a man who wanted to live but the smile of a man who had made a decision. Hassan's eyes were calm in a way that felt like frost. Raffi's finger froze. The bridge cameras showed the officer leaning down and whispering something to Hassan. The man nodded. He stepped toward the bridge, toward the blue light. He passed a line of aliens who did not know he would betray them. He raised his chin like a man who thought he had chosen the only way to keep others safe. The camera closed in on his face. Hassan's lips moved. He spoke in the alien tongue he had only learned from scraps. His voice sounded clear and strange. The officer on the bridge looked surprised and then pleased. Orders were obeyed. The ship moved. Rafi felt the air leave him. Zara let out a small sound, the first thing she had made since the plan began. Amir's hand trembled on the table. Outside, the cruiser turned, as if following a new star. Inside the cellar, a small radio hissed and waited. Hassan's smile stayed on the screen. He walked toward the bridge like a man going to a stage. The camera held his face. He lifted his hand in a small, quick salute. Rafi did not know if Hassan had chosen to save them or to betray them. He only knew one thing: the voice that had once stopped a fleet now answered back with another human voice walking toward the bridge. The screen went black for a long beat. Then a single line of text blinked on the feed: "Bridge access granted." The cellar went very quiet. The hall smelled of old metal and cold air. High lights hung from the ceiling like bright moons. Alien symbols ran down the walls. A panel of judges sat on raised chairs. Their faces were smooth and unreadable. The room was so quiet that the scrape of a boot sounded like thunder. A human stood in the center. Her name was Nayla. She had been taken weeks before during a raid. She had bruises on her arms and a paper band on her wrist. Her hair was cut short. Her eyes were steady. Humans watched the feed from a hidden room. Zara's hands trembled. Bilal pressed his thumb into the table until his nails hurt. Rafi tuned the signal lower so no one nearby could hear. Amir sat with the plastic soldier in his pocket. He watched Nayla like a man who had not yet learned to stop hoping. Nayla did not look afraid. She had learned the language of the aliens well enough to read their books. She had read their laws until the letters blurred. She knew ritual and rank and how to make their words trap a man the way a rope traps a deer. The first judge spoke. His voice rolled like a drum. He read the charges: trespass, sabotage, incitement. He used the legal words that meant death. The panel nodded in a slow, cruel way. Nayla listened. Then she answered. She used the same flat voice the judges used. She spoke their words back at them. She used the exact form of address the law demanded. She quoted a clause the judges had not expected her to know. The clause looked like mercy on paper. It read like a loophole. The judges shifted. One of them touched the edge of his robe. The lead judge blinked. He had not seen that clause used this way. The audience felt a small tremor pass through the room. Nayla peeled back the law like a blade. She showed the gaps the judges had never checked. She asked one question and then another. Her questions were small, careful things. Each one forced the panel to answer in a way that punished them for their haste. Outside, ships waited. Commands had to be given in a certain order. Rituals had to be observed before a fleet could move. Nayla named each ritual and each form. She spoke the words that made the bridge officers stop and check their books. The alien system liked rules. It bent to them. When it bent, it could break. In the hidden room, the humans leaned forward. They had planned for this. They had stolen officials' manuals from a supply depot 2 months ago. They had forged a decree weeks ago that looked real to any eye. Now Nayla used that decree on the panel. The judges could not ignore it without breaking their own law. The panel grew angry. They tried to shout the law back into place. Nayla did not fight with anger. She fought with the dry will of someone who had nothing left to lose. She dragged the judges into contradiction. She forced them to rule themselves out of their power. One by one, they made small errors. Each error was a thread the humans pulled until a seam opened. Then a message arrived from the human cell's ship. Bilal's voice was a whisper in the hidden room. It was time. Men and women who had been hungry and cold and quiet moved. They had a plan to take a small supply world not by force but by law. They would use the alien judgment that declared them honorable to take over the station that fed the cruiser lanes. It was a clean strike on paper. It was also cruel in ways that would not show on the ledger. The plan began like a play. Humans staged a ceremony on a captured outpost. They dressed in torn uniforms and wore alien insignia they had earned by trick or bartered mercy. They performed the rites the aliens expected. They spoke the right words. They acted with honor. The alien garrison watched, pleased to see tradition live. While the ceremony went on, Raffi sent a packet of orders. The orders used the judge's newly written ruling as proof of a chain of command. Machines accepted the code. Locks opened. Gates lowered. Men who had been drinking stood to salute. By the time the garrison understood, the humans were already inside the supply vaults. The station's stores became human stores before the alarm returned. Victory was quick and almost clean. Food trucks began to run out with human flags. A shortage meant a convoy reroute. A reroute meant a cruiser running late. The ripple of small things added up. The fleet's timing faltered across dozens of systems. But not all cost was counted. A child lost a mother because a convoy was delayed 3 hours. A man who had stayed to guard a grain silo never saw morning. The human crew buried silence in their pockets after the strike. No one counted the faces that could have been spared if they had made different choices. Arguments rose in the hidden room like cold wind. Some said law was the best weapon because it left little blood on hands. Others answered that trickery with law was still trickery and that tricks had a way of turning backward. Amir spoke once, quietly. He said that war had no clean path. Still, someone must choose. Someone must act. As the humans argued, the alien command tried to close the breach. They sent inspectors with bright helmets and flashing codes. They demanded paperwork. They summoned the judges to explain. The judges who had faltered earlier now had to hold a public hearing to explain why a supply world had changed hands. The hearing was loud and ugly. Nayla watched the hearing from a small window in her cell. Her face was tired, but a thin smile touched her mouth. She had done what she could. The judges could no longer hide their mistakes. The alien system had to answer itself in front of everyone. At the end of the day, Bilal sat on a low wall and watched a caravan leave the station. Food and tools rolled away in trucks with human flags. Children in the outskirts cheered. Some cried. The human crew felt both pride and grief. That night, when the convoy found a safe road, Zara climbed a small ridge with an old transmitter. She tuned it to a frequency the aliens never listened to because it sounded like a child's choir. Her fingers shook as she spoke into the mic. She did not speak law or orders. She spoke a voice that called to humans, small, rough words that were simple and true. Come home, she said. Come if you can. Bring knives and tools. Bring nothing you will miss. The message carried on stolen beams and old radios. It was not loud. It was not polished. It was honest. A child's listener in a burned town heard it and told his neighbor. A scavenger on a distant moon heard it and packed a small bag. A captain with a broken ship set a new course. On Zara's screen, a map lit where small dots had been empty. One dot. Then another. Then a slow string of small lights moving like fireflies across the dark. The hidden room held its breath as the dots grew. Nayla lifted her face to the small window and watched the feed. A mercy clause on a page had opened a path. People answered the call. The judges would speak again, and the aliens would try to mend their power. But the rules had changed. The humans had learned how to play the game. Outside, in the black of space, lights moved toward an old point of gathering. The camera held on them until they became a river of motion heading to a place with a name and a plan. The hidden room went quiet. No one smiled for long. Still, the screen showed the lights growing. The voice on the small transmitter had done what noise could not. It had invited people back. The map filled with movement, and the crew knew the war was no longer only about hiding. It was about building. Night lay flat over the road like black cloth. Stars were thin pinpricks. A convoy rolled slow under the moon. Tanks and supply rigs moved in a long line, headlights like steady beetle eyes. Behind them, men and women inside the trucks ate salt and told old jokes to keep their hands steady. A human watchman planted a white flag on the roadside. It fluttered in the wind like a soft promise. The convoy slowed. Soldiers climbed down with their rifles slung. They looked at the flag and the empty road and thought of home. They did not know the road had teeth. Under the dirt near the culvert, hands had worked for 3 nights. Nets of wire and chain waited. Springs held them like quiet traps. Holes hid bright glass that would throw light when broken. A simple mirror array waited on a hill, aimed at the road where the convoy would pass. One small man with a soldering iron held a box that smelled of metal and oil. He called it a blinder. It would not kill. It would blind, confuse, and buy time. The plan was ugly and clever. Humans would show mercy, then make the moment of mercy into a tool. They would surrender 1 truck and 1 unit to appear weak. That would encourage the convoy to stop, to relax. Then the traps would spring. The nets would catch wheels. The mirror would throw a whitewash that made pilots drop their eyes. People would fall into the gully. The humans would take the convoy and go fast. Amir watched from a ridge with the small toy in his pocket. His face was set in the hard weather of a man who had lost more than his hair. Beside him, Zara clasped a rope like a lifeline. Bilal checked a map by the light of a dying lamp. Rafi tuned into the convoy's channel and listened to the slow, polite talk of soldiers who never guessed they were the prey. "Remember the child," Amir said, low. "Remember why we do this." Zara nodded. Her hands did not shake. She had seen too many empty plates. She had also seen too many nights where mercy meant a child lived. That tension lived in her like a weight and a warm coin. Others around them had different coins to hold. They let 1 truck stop. Men in gray uniforms climbed down and raised the white flags. The convoy's lead commander walked alone toward the truck. He smiled like a man who expected no pain. He did not notice the glint of wire under the grass. At Amir's sign, someone triggered the net. It shot up and caught the truck like a mouth. Wheels locked. Men tumbled. Shouts rose. The mirror array flashed. Pilots dropped their heads and cried out. In the bright white 1,000 small mistakes happened, a wrong step, a dropped radio, a boot slipped. The convoy was trapped like fruit in a net. Humans poured out from the roadside and the bushes. They took the weapons and the food. They took nothing they did not need. They took the convoy's records, maps, and the blueprints for patches in the fleet. They moved fast and quiet as ghosts. In 10 minutes they were gone, leaving behind twisted metal and confused soldiers. They had won. The supplies fed 1,000 people for a week. They repaired a broken generator. They also left a field of men who would not forget the sting of a white flag. Then the counter-strike came. A cruiser answered the convoy's lost call. It burned a path through the sky and found a human town 2 valleys away. The cruiser did not give warnings. It struck hard and fast. Houses went dark in a single breath. Smoke rose like a question. The townspeople who had not had time to run pressed in the streets with their hands over their mouths. The hidden room watched on stolen feeds. Zara's throat closed. Bilal's knees hit the ground and he could not hold himself. Amir put his face in his hands and felt the small plastic soldier press into his palm like blame. The humans had used mercy as a trick. The aliens answered with the old, terrible answer: punish the innocent for the actions of fighters. A child's legs lay under a roof beam. A grandmother's mouth hung open. The crew could not undo the strike. They could only watch through feeds and count what remained. Anger moved through the human camps like a living thing. It burned away reason. Some said the town should be raised from orbit to show the aliens the cost. Some wanted to send men on suicide raids. Amir heard both sides and felt both. He knew grief, and he knew that grief could make a man do things he could not unmake. The human leaders called a meeting in the map room. Men and women crowded close. Zara spoke first. Her voice was small and sharp. If we burn them like they burned us, she said, we become the thing they feared. We will not win by copying hell. A young fighter spat on the ground. They will never stop, he said. Not while we show them mercy. Rafi looked at the schematics again. He said nothing at first. Then he climbed on a crate and spoke with a calm he did not feel. We have tools they do not expect, he said. We can cut their lines, take their stores, turn their law against them. We can break their trust in themselves. That will hurt them longer than killing one town. It will make their commanders second guess. It will slow them. Arguments ran like fire. The camp split into hot and cold groups. Some wanted to escalate. Some wanted to keep the slow plan. Each choice had weight. Each choice would cost someone. Amir listened and then stood. He did not speak of mercy or law. He spoke of a target the crew had saved for a long time, the Admiral's signal hub. The hub was a tower in orbit, bright as a question mark. It gave orders and shaped fleets. If the humans could silence it, they could make the Admiral's voice a whisper and not a roar. They had no bombs big enough to break a tower. They had a different thing. In a small crate, Bilal kept a device the crew had taken from an old lab. It hummed quietly like an insect. It was clean and polished and frightening. It could cause systems to fail, not by fire but by confusion. It could make a bridge drop its own shields. It could make a fleet's timing slip. Bilal handed the crate to a young engineer named Javed. Javed's fingers were steady. He smiled a small smile like a man who loved machines and feared them at the same time. He took the device and walked toward the staging ship. That night a broadcast cut across the occupied channels. The Admiral's voice, wide and carved like lead, echoed across systems. He spoke slowly and with the pride of power. We will purge Earth, he said. The words fell like a hammer. In the human camps, eyes turned to the sky. A silence made of fear and furious resolve rolled through fields and caves. Javed stood in the dark with the humming crate. He slipped his hand under the latch and felt the cool metal. He did not think of mercy. He thought of the child under a collapsed roof and the woman who had died carrying water. He thought of maps and hungry faces. The crate fit into his arms like a sleeping animal. He flipped the safety on without a sound. The engine aboard their ship hummed. Engines answered. Men prepared. The device in their hands was small and terrible in the right way. It promised a leverage no cannon could buy. Above them the Admiral repeated his vow. Below them 1,000 people watched feeds and listened with ears that felt like knives. Javed lifted the box. He breathed and put his hand on the final switch. He thought of nothing but the choice. Then he pressed down. Far away, in the bright dark of space, a signal woke and yearned. The fleet's consoles blinked. Somewhere a bridge officer frowned at a cascade of errors. A voice that had been steady as stone wavered. On 1,000 screens, humans watched as the effects began to run like slow poison through the enemy's timing. The Admiral's vow still rang in the air. The camera held on Javed's hand as the switch settled into place. The world did not end then. But something large and terrible had begun. The feed cut to black. Dawn came like an alarm. The world held its breath. People moved in quiet lines toward one place, an old launch field no one had used in peace. Trucks carried food, radios, and a crate that hummed like a sleeping insect. Children were hidden in basements. Old men cleaned rifles they had not touched in years. Women adjusted scarves and checked lists. Everyone knew this day might not come back. Amir walked among them with the plastic soldier in his palm. He did not speak much. He watched faces. He saw fear and a hard hope that made people small and brave at once. Zara checked the transmitters and made sure the messages would go where they needed. Rafi fed fake orders into the enemy net while Bilal and others steered small stolen craft into place. Javed had the crate. Naila had the papers that would make the aliens argue until their bridges paused. Hassan, who had gone to the bridge and come back changed, stood with his head low and his hands empty. They had one plan and many small plans. The crate would confuse the towers. The forged decrees would open gates. The mimic voices would make fleets stop and listen. 1,000 small acts would happen at once. They hoped the Admiral's tower would fall silent long enough for the human engines to take it. At night the human ships rose under cloud cover like dark birds. Amir watched the sky from the ground. The Admiral's signal still burned out the air, proud and loud. "We will purge Earth," the voice said weeks before. The words had become a promise of the past. Now the Admiral's voice would have to answer to a tide it could not measure. Rafi sent the first message. It sounded right. It was shaped to the rhythm the Admiral used. Consoles answered and then blinked. Machines asked for verification. The crate Javed's device woke and sang its static song. On 100 bridges, consoles lit with error colors. Shields that were steady like cliffs flickered. Timetables skewed. Orders arrived twice, then not at all. In the middle of the attack, Naila stepped into an alien tribunal and read aloud the forged decree. Judges looked at each other and could not find the words to turn it away. Their ritual slowed. Men on decks looked up from rituals and found their hands empty. The human strain moved like a net through the galaxy. Amir's crew hit the tower. They had no big bombs. They had the smaller, cruel tools war makes, lies shaped into law, voices shaped into orders, and one clean device that would open doors by confusing the guard systems. The tower did not explode. It stalled. Lights went gray. Screens wavered and then went dark. Inside the tower, a young scout moved with the light steps of someone who had practiced saving what was left of his life. He ran past sleeping officers and past doors that did not lock for him. He reached the central console. The console smelled of metal and warm breath. His hands shook. He spoke 3 words in the alien tongue. The words were small and sharp, not a threat but a key. The system accepted them. The tower slipped into silence like a man who has finished a story. Signals stuttered and then fell away. The Admiral's voice lost its reach. Across the fleet, captains sat frozen, hearing commands that no longer came. In the hours that followed, ships drifted. Some surrendered. Some fled into empty space. Small alien outposts lowered their weapons and watched the sky with a shape of fear they had not known. Human fighters took the lanes and moved fast. Convoys that had once been barred now slid through like nets with holes. People cheered, and then they sobbed. Victory came quick in some places. It came slow in others. The humans did not paint it with glory. They took control of supply lines and freed towns. They also made choices no one on the launch field wanted to make. There were councils in tents. Leaders argued with the same heavy words: mercy, safety, revenge. The question was not only what to do with soldiers who fought for the Admiral. It was what to do with the civilians in orbit and the families below who had cheered for a leader and now had no voice. Some said to let the civilians go home. Let them feel the cost and learn. Others said that any group that could let a planet burn must never be allowed to raise ships again. Amir walked through the town that had burned in Part 4. He placed the plastic soldier in the hands of a small girl who had survived. He watched her break it with a small, fierce twist. The sound was almost nothing. He understood then that some things could not be fixed by victory. The human leaders made the worst decision and the hardest one. They chose finality. They argued it would stop future wars. They argued that mercy had become a trap when the enemy used it like a net to catch the kind-hearted. They voted in bitter silence. Orders were given. Systems were locked. Some ships were disabled so they could not leave the rebuilt world lanes. Some officers were taken in and tried in public. Some were never allowed to raise a command again. The cost came in faces. Men who had done what had to be done did not sleep. Some laughed in the day and then could not find joy at night. Amir watched Javed and saw lines cut around his mouth like new scars. Zara walked the kitchens and handed out bowls with hands that trembled. Rafi sat alone and tuned an old radio until static filled the room and he could not hear himself think. Victory had come, but a new silence had settled heavy and alive. In the weeks after, the galaxy noticed. Other races watched human methods and tilted their heads. Some admired the craft. Some feared the shape of the choice. Traders found new routes. A few distant fleets sent cautious envoys. Humans answered in firm, tired tones. They had power now. They had a story. The story would be told in many ways. Late one night, after the fields were quiet and the children slept, a new signal cut across the sky. It was not alien and it was not human. It spoke three small words in a language no one in the camp knew. The words were the same three the scout had typed at the console. On 1,000 screens people looked and then laughed in the small, wild way people laugh when something unknown brushes their life. Amir did not laugh. He sat on a low wall and watched the stars. He thought of mercy and debt and the way promises break or bend. He thought of the child who had loved the plastic soldier. He thought of the woman who had taught him a song. He felt the weight of the choice his people had made and knew the price would live in them like an ache. He whispered nothing. The wind took his words. The stars did not answer. Somewhere far away, something listened.